My name is Alara Miller. Or, well, it was Miller. I dropped the surname years ago, along with the baggage that came with it. Legally, I'm just Alara Vance now. It felt like shedding a heavy, scratchy coat I'd been forced to wear since birth. Growing up in Bakersfield, California, in our cramped, perpetually beige house, felt like living in a skewed reality show where the rules were arbitrary and always favored my younger brother, Leo. He was born 2 years after me, a seemingly golden child, bathed in the perpetual sunshine of our parents' adoration. I, on the other hand, seemed destined to exist in the shadows, a necessary but inconvenient supporting character in the Leo show. It wasn't subtle. It was the air we breathed. If a vase broke, even if Leo was the only one near it holding a baseball bat, my mother's sharp gaze would find me. "Alara, what did you do now? You know how clumsy you are." Leo would stand there, wide-eyed innocence perfected into an art form, sometimes even adding a helpful, "Yeah, Alara, Mom told you not to run in the house." Never mind that I'd been reading quietly in my room. The assumption of my guilt was automatic. The punishment, usually being grounded or losing allowance, was swift. Leo would get a comforting hug and maybe a cookie for being startled. School was another battleground where the disparity was glaringly obvious. I was studious, driven partly by a desire to please them, partly by a fierce need to prove my worth to someone, even if it was just myself. I consistently brought home report cards filled with A's, topping my classes year after year. My parents' reaction? A cursory glance, maybe a non-committal, "That's nice, dear." No praise, no reward, no acknowledgement of the effort. Leo, however, was a different story. He struggled academically, coasting by with C's and the occasional D. Yet when he managed to pull a C- up to a solid C in math, it was cause for celebration. I vividly remember him getting a brand new $300 gaming console for achieving such a great improvement. He beamed. Our parents beamed. I sat at the dinner table that night, my own report card with straight A's tucked into my backpack, feeling invisible, a cold knot tightening in my stomach. When I finally showed it to them later, my father just grunted, "Well, we expect that from you, Alara. Don't get a big head." There was no console for me. There was never anything for me. Birthdays and holidays followed the same pattern. Leo's wish lists were meticulously catered to, resulting in piles of expensive toys, electronics, and clothes. My gifts, if any, were practical necessities disguised as presents. Socks, maybe a generic sweater. Things bought out of obligation rather than affection. One Christmas, Leo got the $500 bike he'd been wanting. I received a planner and a set of budget pens. The message was clear. He was worthy of desire. I was worthy of function. The financial disparity extended beyond gifts. Leo always seemed to have cash for movies or hanging out with friends, slipped to him by Mom for emergencies. My requests, for money, even for school supplies or field trips, were met with lectures about budgeting and responsibility. I started working part-time at a local diner when I was 15, just so I could have a semblance of independence, buy my own clothes, and save a little. They didn't object, probably because it meant one less expense for them. The arguments became worse as I got older. My teenage desire for autonomy clashed constantly with their rigid control that never seemed to apply to Leo. He could stay out late, borrow the car once he got his license, and his explanations for minor transgressions were always accepted. My perfectly reasonable requests were treated as rebellion. If we argued, which was often, my parents would inevitably side with him. "Don't upset your brother, Alara. Why do you always have to provoke him? Can't you just be the bigger person?" I learned to swallow my anger, my frustration, my hurt. It felt like bile constantly rising in my throat. Then came my 18th birthday. It wasn't marked by celebration, cake, or even a card. Instead, I was summoned to the living room after dinner. My father cleared his throat, avoiding my eyes. My mother stared at a spot on the wall. "Alara," my father began, his voice flat. "You're legally an adult now. We've done our duty, raised you. It's time for you to make your own way." I blinked, confusion momentarily overriding the familiar dread. What do you mean?" My mother finally looked at me, her expression hard. "We mean it's time for you to move out, find your own place, get a full-time job. You're responsible for yourself now." Leo smirked from the doorway. He knew. He must have known this was coming. Move out? The words felt like stones in my mouth. Where am I supposed to go? I have barely any savings. I graduate high school in 2 months. "Figure it out," my father said curtly. "We need the space. And frankly, it's time Leo had his own room without you cluttering things up." He gestured, vaguely towards my small bedroom, the one I was soon to be evicted from. But my plans? College? I had been accepted into UCLA, a feat achieved through sheer grit, scholarships I'd hunted down myself, and the money I'd scraped together from the diner. "Community college is good enough if you really want to go," my mother sniffed. "Or just work. Not everyone is cut out for university. Besides, we need to focus our resources on Leo's future. He'll be taking over the family business eventually." The family business. Miller & Sons Hardware. A small, respectable store my grandfather had started, which my father now ran with dwindling enthusiasm. It was their legacy, their pride, and, apparently, it was solely Leo's birthright. My academic achievements meant nothing compared to his surname and gender. There were no further arguments. I saw the finality in their eyes. There was no negotiation, no concern for my well-being, just dismissal. They gave me 1 week. 1 week to pack up 18 years of my life, 18 years of being the unfavored child, and disappear. They didn't offer a dime, not even a suggestion of where I might go. That week was a blur of numb packing and frantic searching. I found a tiny, roach-infested studio apartment on the outskirts of town that cost nearly every penny I had saved. I moved my few boxes myself, using a friend's beat-up pickup truck. As I drove away from that beige house for the last time, there wasn't sadness, just a profound, aching emptiness, quickly followed by a spark of cold, hard determination. They wanted me gone? Fine, I would go. And I would never, ever need them again. The first few years were brutal. I deferred UCLA, enrolled in Bakersfield Community College while working 2 jobs, waiting tables and cleaning offices late at night. Sleep felt like a luxury. Hunger was a frequent companion. There were times I lived on instant noodles and sheer willpower. I learned to be fiercely independent because I had no other choice. I patched leaky pipes in my apartment, navigated bus routes, dealt with creepy landlords, and studied until my eyes burned. Slowly, painstakingly, things started to change. I excelled at community college, secured more scholarships, and finally transferred to UC Berkeley, choosing computer science. It was farther away from Bakersfield, farther away from them, which felt like a crucial part of the healing process. I thrived in the challenging academic environment. I discovered I had a knack for coding, for problem solving, for building things from scratch, perhaps a reaction to having my own foundation constantly undermined. During my junior year, disaster struck. I was involved in a serious car accident on the I-80. A drunk driver slammed into me. I woke up in the hospital with a fractured pelvis, a concussion, and multiple lacerations. The recovery was long and arduous, involving surgery and months of physical therapy. I had to take a semester off school. My carefully constructed world felt like it was crumbling. A friend, Sarah, who had become like family, contacted my parents. She thought they should know that maybe, just maybe, this would be the catalyst for some kind of reconciliation, or at least basic human decency. She called them, explained the situation, told them which hospital I was in. Their response? According to Sarah, my mother listened silently and then said, Well, that's unfortunate. I hope she has good insurance. Tell her we hope she feels better soon. They never called. They never visited. They never sent a card. Nothing. Lying in that hospital bed, filled with pain and fear, their indifference was a fresh wound, deeper than any physical injury. It severed the last, frayed thread of hope I didn't even realize I was still holding on to. They simply did not care if I lived or died. That knowledge was both devastating and strangely liberating. I owed them nothing. Not respect, not forgiveness, not even acknowledgement. I recovered. I went back to Berkeley, more determined than ever. I graduated with honors. I landed an internship at a promising tech startup in Palo Alto, then a full-time job. I poured all my energy, all my thwarted longing for validation, into my work. I was good at it. Really good. I rose through the ranks quickly, moving from software engineer to team lead, then to project manager. I saved aggressively, lived modestly despite my increasing salary. The fear of instability, ingrained from being thrown out at 18, never truly left me. Eventually, seeing a gap in the market for specialized data security solutions, I took a massive leap of faith. With a couple of trusted colleagues and my own savings, I co-founded a cybersecurity company. We called it Aegis Secure. The initial years of Aegis were another kind of relentless grind, but this time it felt different. It was mine. We worked. Insane hours, faced setbacks, celebrated small victories, but we had a solid product, a great team, and timing was on our side. The company grew, slowly at first, then exponentially. We secured major clients, attracted venture capital. Within 8 years, Aegis Secure was a recognized name in the industry, valued at close to $20 million. I was the CEO, living in a beautiful, minimalist house in Palo Alto that I owned outright, driving a car that started reliably, and surrounded by friends who were my chosen family. I was successful, financially secure, and, for the most part, happy. Over the years, whispers about my biological family occasionally reached me through the grapevine. Distant relatives I barely knew, old acquaintances from Bakersfield. I heard that Leo had, as predicted, taken over Miller & Sons hardware after my father retired. I also heard that my parents had given him not only the business, but also their entire savings and early inheritances from my grandparents, totaling somewhere around $500,000 to invest in modernizing the store and expanding. The whispers turned sour over time. Leo apparently lacked my father's already limited business sense and any semblance of work ethic. He spent lavishly, made poor inventory choices, treated employees badly, and reportedly developed a taste for expensive hobbies and perhaps gambling. The hardware store, once a modest but stable pillar of the community, began to flounder. Debts mounted. Loans were taken out, reportedly using the family home as collateral. Then came the final updates. Miller & Sons hardware went bankrupt. It closed its doors permanently. Not long after, the bank foreclosed on the beige house in Bakersfield I grew up in. My parents and Leo were apparently living in a rented apartment, struggling financially. I felt nothing. A strange, detached emptiness. It wasn't schadenfreude, not exactly. It was more like observing the inevitable conclusion of a story I had long since stopped reading. Their choices, their favoritism, their blindness, it had all led them here. It had nothing to do with me. Life went on. I focused on Aegis, on my friends, on building a life filled with the warmth and support I'd never had growing up. Then, about 6 months ago, on a Tuesday afternoon, my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I checked the security camera, feed on my phone. My blood ran cold. Standing on my meticulously landscaped porch were 2 figures I hadn't seen in nearly 20 years, yet recognized instantly. My parents. They looked older, of course, visibly stressed, their clothes cheaper, their faces etched with worry and a hardness I remembered all too well. Beside them, looking sullen and heavier, was Leo. My first instinct was to ignore them, to pretend I wasn't home. But then that spark of cold resolve I'd felt at 18 reignited. No, I wouldn't hide. This was my home, my life. They were the unwelcome intruders. I took a deep breath and opened the door, blocking the entrance with my body. "Ilara," my mother said, her voice attempting a warmth that sounded utterly false. She even tried to smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Hello," I replied, keeping my voice even, neutral. My father cleared his throat, looking past me into my house with hungry eyes. "You've done well for yourself, Ilara." It wasn't a compliment. It sounded like an accusation. "What do you want?" I asked bluntly. There was no point in pleasantries. We were decades past that. "We need your help," my mother blurted out, the fake smile vanishing. "We've fallen on hard times. Leo, the business. It didn't work out. We lost everything. The house." Leo shifted, his weight scowling at the ground. "It wasn't my fault," he muttered. "The economy, bad luck. We have nowhere to go," my father cut in, his voice rising slightly. "We're your parents, Ilara. Family helps family. You owe us." Owe them? The audacity of it stole my breath for a second. I thought of the broken vase, the C-grade console, the planner and pens, the cold dismissal on my 18th birthday, the silence after my accident. "Owe them? Owe you?" I repeated, my voice dangerously quiet. "Let me be very clear. I owe you absolutely nothing." My mother gasped. "How can you say that? After everything we did for you?" "Everything you did?" A harsh laugh escaped me. "You mean kicking me out at 18 with nothing? You mean ignoring my achievements while celebrating his mediocrity?" I flicked my gaze towards Leo, who flinched. "You mean giving him the family business and hundreds of thousands of dollars while I put myself through college working 2 jobs? You mean not even bothering to call when I was in the hospital after a car accident?" Their faces registered shock, then anger. They seemed genuinely stunned that I remembered, that I would dare to bring it up. "That's in the past," my father snapped. "We're talking about now. We're your family. You have all this—" He waved a hand vaguely at my house, my life. "And we have nothing. You have a responsibility." "No," I said firmly. "My responsibility is to myself, to the life I built despite you, not because of you. You made your choices. You favored him." I nodded towards Leo again. "You invested everything in him. Your gamble failed. That is not my problem to solve." "You selfish bitch," my mother shrieked, her face contorting with rage. "After we sacrificed so much for you—" "Sacrificed what?" I shot back, the calm finally cracking. "My happiness? My self-worth? My place in my own family? You sacrificed me for him, and look where it got you." Leo suddenly lunged forward. "You think you're so much better than us now, huh? Living in your fancy house." My father put a hand on Leo's chest, but his own eyes were blazing. "You have to help us, Ilara. We demand it. We'll stay here. You have plenty of room." "Get off my property," I said, my voice ice. "We're not leaving," my mother cried, tears of fury, not sadness, streaming down her face. "This is family property now. You owe us." My father took a step towards the door, trying to push past me. "We're coming in." That was it. The line. They had always pushed, always taken, always assumed my boundaries meant nothing. Not anymore. I held up my hand. "If you do not leave my property immediately, I will call the police." "You wouldn't dare," my father scoffed. "Try me," I said, pulling out my phone. They hesitated for a split second, disbelief warring with the cold certainty in my voice. Then my father, consumed by rage and entitlement, shoved me hard, trying to force his way in. I stumbled back. Leo yelled something incoherent. My mother started screaming obscenities. My thumb hit the call button. 911, I calmly explained the situation to the dispatcher. 3 unwanted individuals on my property, refusing to leave, one of whom had just assaulted me. I gave my address. The flashing lights arrived within minutes. 2 officers approached cautiously. My parents and Leo immediately launched into a hysterical, self-pitying tirade about how I was their ungrateful daughter, how I owed them, how I was throwing them out onto the street. My father denied pushing me. The officers listened patiently, then turned to me. I explained calmly and concisely that these were my estranged biological parents and brother, that I had no relationship with them, that they had shown up uninvited, demanding money and housing, refused to leave when asked, and that my father had physically pushed me when trying to force entry. I mentioned I had security footage. One officer spoke quietly with my parents and Leo, explaining trespassing laws. My father continued to argue belligerently. My mother kept wailing about family obligations. Leo just stood there, radiating impotent fury. When the officer reiterated that they had to leave the property immediately, my father lost it completely. He took a swing, not at me this time, but at the officer. It happened fast. Suddenly, my father was being restrained, handcuffed. My mother started hitting the other officer, screaming. Leo took a step forward, fists clenched, and found himself facing a taser. He wisely froze. Within minutes, all 3 of them were in the back of police cars, arrested for trespassing, assault on an officer, for my father, resisting arrest, for my mother, and potentially other charges. Standing there on my porch, watching the police, cars drive away, I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel joy. I felt a profound, bone-deep weariness, and a strange sense of quiet. It was the definitive, ugly end to a chapter I had tried to close peacefully years ago. They had forced this confrontation, this squalid conclusion. I went inside, locked the door, and leaned against it, breathing deeply. The silence of my house felt vast. They had demanded I fix the mess they had made of their lives, the mess born from decades of their own choices, their own cruelty. They saw my success not as something I had earned through pain and perseverance, but as a resource they were entitled to plunder. They never learned. They never changed. And I would not allow them to drag me back into their vortex of dysfunction. Calling the police wasn't an act of revenge. It was an act of self-preservation. The final boundary drawn against a lifetime of violation. I made myself a cup of tea, my hands shaking slightly. I looked around my living room, at the life I had built, filled with light and peace. It was mine. Earned, protected. They would face the consequences of their actions, consequences set in motion long before they arrived on my doorstep. And I would continue to live my life, free from the shadows of Bakersfield, finally, truly, on my own terms. The silence wasn't empty anymore, it was peace.